Hey guys, welcome to the Cutting Edge Podcast, October. This particular episode is going to be a little strange. It'll probably be very sexually charged, very inappropriate sounding, so fair warning ahead of time. Um, Evolutionary psychology, that is the topic for this evening's lecture. And I think it's a really important topic because it's a topic that no one even considers or thinks about. But there's a premise that everyone needs to understand when it comes to evolutionary psychology, and that most people think that your genes determine your personality. But I disagree with this entirely. I highly disagree with this. And this is probably one of the more controversial positions that I do have, being C.S. Joseph, being the leader of Jungian analytical psychology in the world right now, and moving the science forward and bringing it to new levels and pioneering new aspects. With the team that we have, and also the community involvement of the ego hacker community, and the direction we've been going. We have over the years held some very controversial positions. Controversial positions like our interpretation of the red pill's behavioral psychology, or the ability to psychoanalyze babies and do it accurately and understand the ego of babies, even to the point of being unborn. The thing is that in the case of a human, even an unborn human, they display behavioral characteristics that could still be classified and organized into 16 different variants of behavior times two different genders when it comes to unborn children. And many extroverted thinkers, especially TE parents and TE inferiors, the pessimistic extroverted thinkers, they balk at this and they say it's impossible. But oftentimes that's just cognitive projection, because they all maintain from an interesting perspective. It's like, well, if that's, because they all assume that if I can't figure it out, then automatically no one else can, which is one of the things that I hate the most about extroverted thinking, pessimistic types, is that they make that assumption. If it's impossible for me to understand, then nobody can understand, and that's pure cognitive projection. It's also pure hubris. Well, at the same time, they would accuse me of having hubris by making the claim that I could accurately type an unborn child, which I have. And I've been able to because I have enough introverted sensing data with which to work with to do that, because I used to work in a nursery. I was around pregnant mothers for many years, and I noted that baby movements, baby position inside of the mother's womb, in their tummy, schedules for how they kick, all these little things are points of data that could be utilized to actually move across the type grid and come up with a conclusion, right? And then over time, seeing how these babies are behaving outside of the womb, and where that and how they're growing, I can see that I'm wrong with one particular one, but I was correct with another, and then I'm able to keep track of how I was wrong, how I was correct, and then refine the system to be able to come up with an accurate conclusion, right? It's no different than a born child, basically, and how they interact around other children thereof, right? And then you put a whole bunch of children together, you could see how their behaviors have 16 different variants across both of the genders, for a total of 32 different combinations of typical behavior that very small children would have. This is, in effect, the way with which a human being could utilize the type grid in order to understand specifically their types. I mean, even cognitive origin is extremely prevalent. So, like, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is produce a cognitive origin and see what children react to it and which ones don't. It's not hard. It's not hard. And one of the things about people, some of the people within this community and people outside of this community, they're so judgmental and they're so quick to assume that we as a community lack the ability to not only make these claims, or lack the substance to make these claims, but that it's impossible to do because from their perspective, they don't know how to do it, so it must be impossible, right? And it's this bullshit straw man argument that is literally nothing more than confirmation bias towards their own ego investments, right? And this community has had to stand alone. We have had to stand alone for 4 years now. We have had to stand alone. And as a result of, or maybe even 5 years, we've had to stand alone, much to the ridicule of what emailed anthrax would call the typosphere. We are ridiculed on Quora. We are ridiculed on Facebook. We are ridiculed on Reddit. Ridicule is everywhere because the collective thinks that we are making these entirely outrageous claims with which we're actually unable to, like, they assume that we're unable to have any substance whatsoever, and that there's just no way that these outrageous claims that we're making are even true to begin with. But the reality of the situation is that every single claim that we've been able to make, we have been able to substantiate it, we've been able to prove it, and we've been able to do it. The thing is that, especially when it comes to extroverted thinkers, they really, really have a hard time typing people themselves because they believe that you could psychoanalyze somebody from a process of qualification instead of a process of deduction or disqualification, right? So it's hard for an extroverted thinker to assume that every human being they come into contact with on a type grid has every single trait on the type grid. Because an extroverted thinker utilizes addition to come to their conclusion. They use addition to come to their conclusion. They want to add up, direct and initiating and outcome. They want to add these things up. Okay, they're obviously an in-charge type. So these three things added together equal an in-charge type or structure type, right? They think this way. What they need to do is that they need to assume that every interaction style is present in a human being. And they need to look at which interaction style is more pronounced than the others. And then they are to subtract the ones that are less pronounced. And then the remainder is what is true. The remainder is how they should draw the conclusion. The remainder, that is a process of subtraction. But to do a process of qualification, aka a process of addition, mathematically speaking, in order for an extroverted thinker to do this, the extroverted thinker has to make an assumption. And the assumption is that whenever they're adding something together, they're assuming that the other things that are missing, that they are not adding with, are completely, entirely non-existent. And that is why they constantly fail at using the type grid to type people. This is only a problem with extroverted thinkers. Introverted thinkers don't have this issue, but extroverted thinkers do have this issue because how addition works mathematically, in order to equal a result, you're adding things together, which means those things, you can't have any additional things that could possibly be added to the equation in order to get an equivalent result. It's impossible. So they have to assume thereby that when they're looking at a human being and using a process of qualification or a process of adding up different traits in the type grid, they have to assume that that person does not have those other traits on the type grid, which is false. All human beings have every single trait on the type grid. It's just which ones they have more of. This is why we have to use a process of deduction, a process of subtraction, because subtraction assumes that a human being is a whole organism that has every component or every aspect of the type grid together into one place. So when you look at a person or you look at yourself, you have to assume that you are everything. You have to assume that they are everything. And then all you have to do is see which traits they have more of than the others. And then you just hide the traits they have left and leave the traits that they have more of left over. And then that is how to accurately draw a conclusion. But an extroverted thinker can't do this. They cannot do this because they rely on a system of qualification, also known as inductive reasoning, which is inherently a process of addition. They believe that they can add traits together to equal one of the 16 types as a result. This is false thinking. This is not true. Human beings are pre-existing complete systems. They are pre-existing systems that have all traits, meaning a human being is complete. They just have less of some traits and more of other traits. But they still have all traits. They are still a complete being. They still have all traits. But inductive reasoners cannot see it that way. And because they don't see it that way, based on their form of thinking, this is why they are consistently inaccurate at typing people. This is why, out of all of the 16 types, the people that hires the most for typing sessions within coaching are NTJ types. NTJ because they're abstract enough to accept that the system might be real, or it is real. They're abstract enough, but they also are extroverted thinkers, TE hero, TE parent, and they just can't do it on their own. And it's really, really hard for an NTJ, to, especially an INTJ, to humble themselves enough to even realize that they don't have the mental building blocks, because the inductive reasoning is getting in the way, to be able to accurately type somebody, right? So that's a problem. That's a problem. So an input error says you can have a negative within the addition, so 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus negative 1 equals 2. Yeah, sure, you still can, but in order for you to, algebraically speaking, in order for you to handle a negative number, you have to assume that they are all the whole, because the negative number actually makes it a subtractive equation. It's no longer inductive, is my point. It becomes a deductive model as soon as you add a negative number, input error. Even if you're using parentheses, because it becomes an algebraic expression, because you have to have a concept of zero present, which means you have to default to logic. This is why algebra is logical. It is not rational. Okay? That's the problem. Algebra is deductive reasoning. It is not inductive reasoning. So this is one of the things that people outside of this community consistently ridicule us for. They ridicule us because you have all these extroverted thinkers. You have these INFPs, these ISFPs, these ISTJs, and INTJs, these 4 types, the most, who are out there herf-blurfing, surfing the internet, trying to come up with an answer to understand Myers-Briggs type indicator. When they look at the ego hacker community, when they look at C.S. Joseph, they have no choice but to block at it, because they assume, literally projecting their ego onto everybody else in the entire world, that they assume that everything could be understood from their inductive reasoning model. And the truth is, that's not the case. It's not the case. And they continually mistype people, and they continually assume that the problem is with us and not with themselves, and not with their ego investments. Now, granted, it is possible that an INTJ or an ISTJ could actually use and grow their TI critic to a point where they could actually use deductive reasoning at some point in time to be able to utilize the type grid accurately, but it would cost an extreme amount of mental energy. And if they are a UD type or UDUF type specifically, especially UDUF variant, octagram variant of an ISTJ or an INTJ, those types of people would have the highest opportunity of being able to accurately type others. But again, it still is difficult, it still is a problem, and it's not the most reliable thing. Again, this is why these are the people who hire us the most, because they have humbled themselves to the point to realize that they cannot rely on their inductive reasoning to actually come up with an accurate conclusion when typing other people. They realize that they mentally do not have the deductive reasoning required. So, in as much as people like to claim, well, I need to find more vectors, I need to find more building blocks with which I can perform my addition with, it still won't do any good. It still presents the same mathematical problem over and over and over. So this is why whenever I meet an extroverted thinker, especially an extroverted thinking pessimistic, and they tell me that what they believe a person's type is, I remember that it's just a belief and it's not a fact. And I basically, mentally in my head, I just auto dismiss them. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Whatever. That's nice that you believe that, but I don't care. I didn't verify that. And someone I trust to verify that didn't verify that. It just can't happen. So, no. Like, I have yet to meet an expert thinking pessimist who is actually capable and accurate and consistently accurate with typing others. I've yet to meet them. I have not met them. I haven't. And that's reality. But these are the people who are first going to be judging us the most. These are the people on the internet who judge us above everybody else. They're the most judgmental. They're the quickest to dismiss. So I've had to end up dismissing them because they like to act like they think they know what they're talking about, but they're the first people that you should be dismissing within this community because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They don't. They like to put on a big show, especially the INTJs, but they don't know shit. And isn't it so interesting that it's always the INTJs that claim that their parents or their children are INTJs as well? No. No, that's bullshit. That's cognitive projection. And the ones who commit the sin of cognitive projection, even though it's not really a sin, it's actually a survival instinct, but whatever. The ones that rely on the survival instinct the most because of their expert intuition paranoia is INTJs. So when it comes to people making claims about, oh, I know what type this person is, or I know, like, if an INTJ is talking about it, you could just basically dismiss what they're saying. You could basically be like, yeah, I don't believe that. You could just basically be psychologically prejudiced against them and just auto dismiss them like that because it's just like, you don't actually know what you're talking about because you lack the mental faculties to use the deductive reasoning to actually come to a proper conclusion about someone's type. Now, if you're going to outsource your thinking to somebody else, a trusted, credible source who is using deductive reasoning, then okay, sure, I accept that. No problem. No issue with that. That's way more trustworthy than you, the INTJ, coming up with the conclusion yourself. And as much as INTJs hate to admit it, as I'm exposing them here right now, they really suck at typing. They suck. They're not that good. They're really not that good. And I just like they all like to act like they're so smart and actually think what they're doing. But the problem is that it's creating a culture that is against us, against the ego hacker community, against C.S. Joseph, against Chris Taylor, against our team, because they like to sit on the INTJ forums, they like to sit on Reddit, they like to sit on somethingawful.com, they like to sit on Quora, and all talk to each other because they all got to have that perspective of, would you like to take a survey? Because I'm going to do a survey and survey says, and it's like, what happens when you INTJs just survey all of the ignorant people because you INTJs are looking for the shortcut because you're not willing to put in the SI demon effort yourselves, okay? And it might take you your entire lives to finally build a deductive reasoning model with which you can interface the type grid. And only then can somebody remotely trust you with typing people. Maybe then. Maybe. Right? But then you want to walk around acting so arrogant with your hubris and imagining to yourselves that you're intelligent and smart enough to actually be able to come up with the proper conclusions, and then you want to project that onto everybody else? No, I don't think so. That's not going to work. So it's because of this culture from expert thinking pessimistic, that we're under attack consistently when we make claims about typing small children or making claims about typing unborn children or making claims about typing animals. I didn't first make the claim of typing animals. My INFJ mentor did, who taught me this science for years, and I have surpassed him since. And as much as I like to sound like the ENTP Darth Vader, now I am the master. Okay? Well, here's the thing. Like, they still have to rely on some source. They're still extroverted thinkers. And these extroverted thinkers, because it's like, oh, let's take a survey. I'm going to go Google around and find out what everybody says on the topic. Oh, but C.S. Joseph is the one person that, that C.S. Joseph is the one person, that's different from everybody else. So because of that, low-hanging fruit, SI demon mode, because I'm not interested in putting in any effort, that means by default, oh, well, he has to be wrong. And yet you have Niccolo Machiavelli saying in the book The Prince, something that INTJs typically read, you have him saying, oh, well, if the majority accepts an idea, then you can just automatically assume the idea is false. You see? The fact that the ego hacker community, Chris Taylor, C.S. Joseph, all these people are the outspoken minority with the minority ideas means, statistically, especially according to Machiavelli himself, we're the ones in the right and everybody else is not. And then we have, for example, people within, the CS Verified group who want to spend all this time listening to other people outside of the community, or even listening to some people inside of the community to disagree with C.S. Joseph's, typings of these people, right? Oh, these people must, because, hey, I want to put in I wanted to not put in much effort. I want to get the low hanging fruit. Hey, would you like to take a survey? I'm going to survey all these people to get everyone's opinions about what my type is, instead of listening to the facts that C.S. Joseph presented to me within our coaching session. Yeah, that's really effective. That's really going to get them far. You TE users think you're so smart with your little surveys that you take and surveying all these people to try to gather up these opinions so that what? So you can feel correct? How about actually being correct? Can you do that? Can you actually process the data that you gather? No, you can't. That's your problem. But you assume that you can. And it's especially worse when you have to deal with FI child superiority complex from an INTJ, because the INTJs are the ones who are creating this culture. And it's necessary for me to say within this huge introduction for this particular lecture, because I'm going to be making some serious claims that I haven't really made before within the context of this cutting edge episode. Serious claims that are just like, oh my God, what the hell? Claims that are so outlandish and so crazy, it's on the same level as me claiming that I can type unborn children. It's on the same level of me claiming that I can type animals, which I could type dogs and cats. I learned that skill from my INFJ mentor, and it was his idea. And when he first told me, folks, I let him have it. I told him he was crazy, that was impossible, there's no way. But the reality of the situation is I was just projecting my own ego and my own weakness onto him. And he proved it to me. And he shouldn't have had to. Because if I was just patient, and if I just listened to him, I probably would have been able to enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, and realize that, oh yeah, animals do have their own persona. It's just a three-dimensional persona. It's not a four-dimensional persona like what we have with the human mind. So this ends up becoming a huge issue. So I'm going to be making some crazy claims. Evolutionary psychology. And my first crazy claim is that it's not genetics that determines our type. No. Our genetics are determined by our type, actually. It's the other way around. Our genes, our genetic expression is determined by our cognitive functions. Evolutionary psychology. There's a lot of aspects of evolutionary psychology. Prejudice, racism. People think that these are major social problems. They're not. Nope. They're survival instincts. It is evolution literally creating survival instincts within our minds. Oh, but racism is a big time social issue. It's a social problem. We need to no, it's not. No, prejudice is a survival instinct, people. I don't care how unwoke that sounds. It's actually more woke if you think about it from an evolutionary point of view. It's just our brains trying to protect ourselves and each other. That's all that is. See, that's the reality. That's the reality. But that's just one crazy claim. Evolutionary psychology matters. So, what are some of the practical applications of evolutionary psychology? Well, there is one major practical application of evolutionary psychology that is basically insanely important, and that is visual typing. A lot of people have a huge struggle with visual typing. People don't really understand how to actually make visual typing actually work. And the people who are the best at visual typing are extroverted sensing optimistic types. This is the ENJ, so ENTJ, ENFJ, ESTP, and ESFP. They are all very good at visual typing. And then conversely, also their polar opposites can be as well to a point, which would be INFJ, ISFP, although not as much ISFP and not as much ISTP. But visual typing is a thing, okay? I was first exposed to visual typing by my ESTP mentor. He's extremely good at it. He had like an 80% accuracy rate. It's just certain types he was more familiar with than others, and he would jump to certain conclusions about certain people with their mannerisms and their behavior. But like a person's gait, how they walk, that's very indicative of their type. The shape of their jaw, their hair, whether it's coarse or straight or whatever, based on the different combinations of their bodies, the placement of their body fat, how they wear their clothes, what kinds of clothes they wear at what different times, at what times of the day, these different things, right? All these different things are aspects that visual typing can keep track of. And there's so many different scenarios, so many different vectors when it comes to visual typing. It can be difficult and it's so overwhelming, it can be difficult to do accurately. But for some reason, INFJs and ESTPs are just so good at it. They could just get a sense and just say it and do it. And they're able to put it all together because they're the most external of the 16 types with their sensing. They're able to use their extroverted feeling and their extroverted sensing together in such a way to be able to profile somebody from a visual typing perspective. And evolutionary psychology is how it goes. Why? Because your psyche determines your genetic expression. Your body is a direct expression of your type, not the other way around. Okay? Your body is a result. This is why ENTJ women are statistically taller than all the other women. That's why they're statistically the tallest. This is why on a women's basketball team, you'll have STPs and NTJ women make up the majority of the team because they're the tallest of the women statistically. Because their types determine their genetic expression. Okay? This is why, for example, certain behaviors. This is where I'm going to go like hypersexual here. For example, genitalia. The size and shape of genitalia, direct expression of your type. Very much so. For example, if you're a woman and you're an extroverted sensing, if you're an extroverted sensing optimistic, so if you're SE child or SE hero, your vaginal lips, they're pretty out. They're like outside of yourself, right? Versus if you're an extroverted sensing pessimistic, they're more on the inside. They're more on the inside, right? NTP men, they are hung like horses. They are all huge. They're huge. Why? Because when you're having sex, women who are laying down on their back statistically are able to get pregnant when the man is thrusting into them from the top, right? They don't have to deal with gravity. The thing is, though, is that these masculine women, these extroverted sensing optimistic women, ESFPs, ESTPs, ENFJs, ENTJs, they all like being on top, okay? It's really hard for a woman to get pregnant if she's on top all the time, right? So what does evolution do to fix this? Well, the men that they're on top of, they make those men huge. That way, they could still actually potentially make contact with the woman's cervix inside of her when they're exploding, right? And then all that semen is able to make direct contact with the cervix, even though she is on top of him. Whereas it usually is required to be the other way around, where the woman is on her back and the man is on top, and then all of a sudden that semen can just seep right down to her cervix and get into the womb. You see what I'm saying? But of course, oh, that's preposterous, Mr. C.S. Joseph. Like, that's entirely preposterous. No, that's how it works. Evolution is entirely aware of these issues. The reason why, like for example, these SE optimistic women's, their vaginal lips are just hanging out for everyone to see. Like they're just like they're huge, they're out there. It's because they're there to make sure that nothing gets out because they are on top. They don't want that semen to come out. They got to hold it in there. You see what I'm saying? I sound like a fucking lunatic right now, but like that's not the point. I'm trying to show you guys that these sexual differences are there. All right. Whereas it's like if you were to look at an introverted, sensing, pessimistic woman, where everything's all on the inside, like it means that there's a much bigger obstacle for the men to have to get through to penetrate them. You see what I'm saying? It's completely different, right? And that's why the men that they're supposed to be built with are like SPs, for example, because those are SJ women, right? SP men. You see what I'm saying? Where SP men are on the top. They may not have as big of a package as like an NTP man, for example. They may not be as big, but they make up for it by utilizing gravity because they're on top, and for a high amount of thrusting because they're on top. Hmm. Wonder how that works. Oh, you see what I'm saying, folks? Like, this matters. This absolutely matters. Genetic expression is determined by your type. Your body and your epigenetic expression, your genes will express based on your type, not the other way around. Your type, because your type will determine how you behave in the bedroom. Evolution is aware that your psyche has sexual behaviors, and evolution's like, crap, we need to make sure that we are focusing everything we have on the longevity and the success of the human race. And these types have certain preferences with how they behave in the bedroom sexually. So we need to make sure that the genes are being expressed to support optimal sexual results. So these oh my God, these ENTJ women that just have to be on top. They have to dominate. They got to be on top, unless they're drunk, of course, which doesn't happen very often. But let's just say, hey, they have to be on top. So I guess we need to make sure that their lips are shaped in a certain way. The men need to make sure that, that their packages are large enough to be able to hit the other side, because there are men out there who are not long enough to be able to make contact with the cervix on their own. And there are men who are long enough to make contact with the cervix on their own. And NTP men can, because NTP men are built to be with the women who prefer to be on top, right? So we have to make sure that the semen is able to even get to the freaking cervix, because gravity is going to be a problem, and our evolution is already aware of that issue, right? So the genes and genetic expression end up being subservient to the potential behavior that a psyche would determine would happen in the bedroom ahead of time. This is only logical, folks. Okay? That's the point. That's literally how it works. All right? This also is one of the reasons why people are attracted to the types they should be attracted to. If you look at the 8 sexual compatibilities between the affection relationship and the natural relationship, the silver, which is the respect relationship, as well as the refinement relationship, those 4 relationships, I call those the long-term relationships. Each of those relationships serve a different purpose, serve a different function based on the particular individual sexually, and our genes have certain genetic expression as a result of sexual expression, basically, sexually expressive behaviors as a result of our genetic predisposition, as a result of our psyches. Okay? Our psyche is what determines our behavior, and our genes are aware of all of our potential behavior. Thus, our genes will adapt to our psyches in order to guarantee the longevity and the procreational success of the human race. That's literally what's happening. Okay? So that's it. That's a whole issue. I also talked about this recently in there's another aspect about this. Another aspect of evolutionary psychology. I've been slightly touching on it within the acolyte lectures, but women, for example, versus men and how they choose their friends. Women choosing women friends, men choosing male friends. Men want compatibility because they don't get the opportunity to experience unconditional love, whereas women get the opportunity to experience unconditional love from their compatible relationships, but men don't. So, because of that, women prefer to have camaraderie friendships, friendships with other women based on camaraderie, versus men who prefer to have relationships based on compatibility. So, because men, so men crave unconditional love. They don't really ever get it in their life. There's only one relationship in their life where they may get unconditional love, where they're most likely to get unconditional love, and that's their relationship with their mothers. The thing is that often doesn't happen, and oftentimes, between their mothers trying to abort them or the mothers actually abandoning them, like child abandonment statistics relating to mothers abandoning their children are actually a lot higher than most people realize and most people think. Child abuse statistics are also extremely high, probably actually higher among women than men. I would actually take up that position from a child abuse perspective. I really think that there's a higher risk of child abuse in today's day and age. Maybe not 400 years ago, but in today's day and age, due to female solipsism being encouraged by society, I think child abuse is higher amongst mothers to children than fathers to children. And that's a pretty crazy claim to make, but I actually believe that's the case based on the anecdotal evidence that I've collected, being around pregnant mothers, nursing mothers, and actual mothers, from my many, many, many years in a nursery, being involved with a lot of small children and things that I've experienced and things I have to deal with, plus what I've had to deal with within the context of my own coaching practice. I'm just seeing a pattern here, folks. I'm seeing a pattern. And as near as I could tell, abuse is actually higher from women towards children than men towards children. So this could be. I mean, it is a huge issue. It's a problem. So because men don't really have any form of any real true source of unconditional love, they really can only get that unconditional love from themselves. And this is what women expect from men anyway. They expect men to just not be a pussy. They expect men to just be able to do everything on their own, 100% independent of a woman anyway. And be able to come up with that unconditional love of self for the self, which is ultimately proof of what masculinity actually is anyway. But this is why men like to have compatible relationships. They like to be compatible with men in their life, and they like to be compatible with women in their life. Women, they already get enough unconditional love anyway. They get so much unconditional love from society. They get unconditional love even from fellow women, because women don't really hold each other accountable. They never hold each other accountable. They'd rather lie to each other. So they are constantly, because of that, they're getting this delusional form of unconditional love from their fellow women due to the lack of accountability, due to the lack of the mature feminine, basically. And because of that, their ego investments are being consistently enabled, and they just don't really need unconditional love. They don't really need it. So they save unconditional love for their one compatible relationship. A woman doesn't really need compatible relationships in her life. So she saves it for just one relationship, and that's the relationship she has with her man. And maybe a relationship that she has with her sons. those very, very important male relationships in her life. Saves her compatibility. She only has, like, a woman only has enough room, evolutionary speakingly, within her psyche for compatibility. And she saves it just for those relationships. The rest of them, it's all camaraderie. Whereas it's the opposite for men. A man only has so much room for camaraderie, but has this basic need for compatibility due to the lack of unconditional love in his life. It's one of the reasons why men's sexual strategy is based on polygyny and why they need to have a variety of women in their life, because they are taking pieces of unconditional love from each of the women in their lives and taking it internally themselves and making this giant puzzle with all these different pieces from all these different women to create a complete picture of unconditional love and slap it on their soul, internalize while they're internalizing it. This is why it's impossible for one woman to completely satisfy one man. It is actually impossible. There's no way one woman could provide enough unconditional love for a man. It is impossible. This is why a man must have multiple women in order to draw upon puzzle pieces of unconditional love from each of the women and put them together internally within his soul so he can at last experience what it is like to have unconditional love. This is why women are pre-coded mentally with the idea of pre-selection. This is why women are typically more attracted to married men than non-married men. This is why women are more attracted to men who already have women in their lives, for example, because that pre-selection. Because, like, for example, if you give a group of men to women, a woman will choose. But if you give a group of women to a man, he will play. Because, again, he's trying to mine the unconditional love out of each of those 10 women, for example. Whereas if you give 10 men to a woman, she'll choose the best out of the 10. Whereas the man will actually see, oh, look at the 10 women. I'm going to mine whatever unconditional love pieces, these little puzzle pieces that I can get from each of those women thereof. This is why they have the polygynous sexual strategy, whereas women have a hypergamous sexual strategy. They're trying to optimize their situation with the man and get with an optimized man, whereas the man is just trying to try to absorb all of the possible unconditional love that he could possibly absorb from each of the individual women. Okay? This is how it works. This is why it works. So it really comes down to unconditional love. Well, here's the thing. Evolutionary psychology is aware of this fact. It is aware. It is aware that women prefer camaraderie-based relationships and men prefer compatibility-based relationships, because women, by default, they get to experience unconditional love because the masculine idealism in the world, the masculine idealism serves up unconditional love for women on a silver platter, just like it is written biblically. Love your wife as Christ loved the church, he who gave himself up for her. He is ultimately the ultimate pinnacle of masculinity, which means that includes masculine idealism. He gave up his life for his beloved, for it is written, there is no greater love than when a man gives up his life for his beloved or for his friend. Okay? Which means, from a masculine idealism standpoint, that love is agapeo love. It is unconditional love that is afforded from men to women. But it is impossible for women to do the same for men. This is why men need to have multiple women to be able to mine as much unconditional love from each of them as individual sources so that he could actually experience what it's like to have unconditional love as a result of him having the multiple women in his life. Don't believe me? Guess what? Evolutionary psychology agrees with me. Think about it. If women cared about compatibility as much as men did, it would be impossible for the polygynous sexual strategy of men to even work. Because think about it, a man. So let's say I have a sexual relationship with my affection relationship. Let's say I have a sexual relationship with an INTJ woman. Let's say I have a sexual relationship with my companions. That's an INFJ. Let's say I have a sexual relationship also with my natural. That's an ISFP. Let's say the same with my intrigue. That's an ISTP. Let's say it's the same with the respect. That's an ENTJ. So I have 5 women now. Let's say it's the same with my trust relationship. That's an ENFJ. Okay, like my ex, Kim. Okay, let's say I have a relationship with my refinement relationship. That's my ex-wife. That's an ESFP. Let's say I have a relationship with my kindred. which is my wife, an ESTP. Let's say I have a sexual relationship with these 8 women right now, and I, as a man, get to experience all 8 sexually compatible relationships with me at the same time, simultaneously, and I have all 8 of them. Okay. Wait a minute, how is that possible? So obviously, my sexual strategy of polygyny is working out. But the sexual strategy of each of these women's hypergamy is also working out because I'm the best that they've experienced in their lives. They've optimized their hypergamy with me. They also have pre-selection because they saw that all these other girls were with me already, so they want me too. I literally had an INFJ woman literally yesterday tell me, "Oh my God, I'm so attracted to married men." And she's like, "Oh my God, you're a married man and I want to get with you." And I'm like, "Well, that's nice, but I'm not into you. Sorry, that's not going to work. Like, no thanks." But she made it very clear to me that her absolute favorite thing is married men. She wants married men. She only has an eye for married men. She's like, it's like a kink or something. I'm like, no, that's hypergamous pre-selection, actually. But what's the point I'm trying to make here? Think about it. What do all of the 8 sexually compatible types have in common with each other in relation to me? Oh, that's right. They all are of camaraderie from a sexual compatibility, a sexual function, perception function perspective. They are all camaraderous with each other, but compatible with me. Camaraderous with each other, compatible with me. Because women already prefer to be in camaraderie relationships via Pareto principle 80% of the time, which means 4 out of 5 women that a woman is a friend with, when they have 4 out of the, so let's say a woman has 5 friends, 4 out of 5 of those 5 friends she has camaraderie with, and only one of them she is compatible with. With men, it's the other way around. 4 out of 5 male friends that a man has, he is compatible with, and one of them he is camaraderie with. Okay? So, this means, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, women were pre-built to share men with each other. They're pre-built because they already, from a female-female relationship perspective, they already prefer to be camaraderie. They already prefer to have camaraderie. They already prefer to have shoulder-to-shoulder relationships. They're already there. And of course, it would have to be that way because for the male sexual strategy polygyny to actually even be true, that would require all of the women that he is with to not have much conflict with each other. It's because they already prefer to have camaraderie with one another anyway. Which means if I have these 8 different women from from a Jungian sexuality perspective of each of the 8 sexual compatibilities, automatically they're all compatible with me, but they're already pretty happy with each other being sister wives because they have camaraderie with one another. Say it isn't so. Oh my God. But that's the facts. Evolutionary psychology is aware of this fact. Yes, ENFJ and ENTJ is camaraderie, Magdalene. Yes. Based on what I know, like on many of the women who are actually in the chat right now, it's a fact. It's completely proven true. They're fine with it. Women are pre-programmed from an evolutionary psychology perspective to share high-value men. And a man who already has a woman is a man who's been pre-selected as a valued man, a man of value, which causes other women to want him more. It's a fact. And because women prefer female on female relationships from the perspective, from the standard of camaraderie, it's possible. Because imagine if women were all compatible with each other in the same household as sister wives, that would mean by default they would have camaraderie with the man, and that's not going to be a good sexual relationship whatsoever. It's not. Which means the man's not going to be interested in having that kind of relationship anyway. And the women are not going to be interested in having that kind of relationship anyway. This is why there's this thing called lesbian bed death. Okay, lesbian bed death is a thing. This is why I maintain lesbianism is kind of fake. It's kind of fake news. It's kind of sourced. It's just the self bending in on the self. It's the ultimate form of solipsism. And I think these relationships really just form out of trauma and rejection and pain and are not actually natural. Whereas I think homosexuality is definitely natural in terms of a gay situation, a male on male thing. Whereas lesbianism, not so much. I think lesbianism is more of a nurtural thing, whereas being gay is more of a natural thing, based on what I know of evolutionary psychology. Another crazy claim that hurts a lot of people's feelings. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter if it's natural or nurtural. You get to live your life however you want to. You have the freedom of choice. I ain't judging. I'm just saying that your life has conditioned you to a point where you can be a lesbian. And making the claim that you're born a lesbian, I don't think that's accurate at all. I don't. I don't think that's accurate. I think that's just conditioning. I think you've been conditioned to think or feel that way. Whereas there's more than enough evidence to say that gay relationships are actually natural. So that's also another crazy claim. Again, based on evolutionary psychology, based on the fact that female on female relationships, 4 out of 5 times are dominated by camaraderie and not compatibility. Because women save their compatible relationships for their relationships with the men they are closest to, the men they choose, and the men they give birth to. Literally that. So lesbianism, for example, like if these girls are sister wives, they could be lesbian towards each other, but it's still underneath the umbrella of the masculine of the man they all share, basically, from a polygynous perspective, from within the male sexual strategy. The male sexual strategy is facilitating the sister wife lesbian perspective, is what I'm saying. And without that male or that masculinity present, without that shared man, that shared masculinity present, the two sister wives, the two lesbians in a relationship will succumb to what's known as lesbian bed death. Okay, look it up. It's basically when there is zero sexuality between the two women who are together. And it's because, and that's literally all lesbianism is. Lesbianism is just sister wives without the shared pre-selected man, without the shared valued man. That's all it is. That's all lesbianism is. You add that man in there to facilitate the masculinity, it actually destroys the lesbian bed death because they're both able to absorb the man's masculinity, and then as a result of that, grow closer together. Lesbianism is really only truly possible and truly satisfying for lesbians involved if they are also sharing a man together, is basically with the point that I'm trying to make. That's, yeah, so like I said, bold claims that are destroying people's ego investments, folks. No one likes it. So you see what I'm saying? Because women prefer camaraderie, men prefer compatibility, this is what ends up happening. Now let's look at the male compatibility side. Let's say I have those 8 women. Let's say I have my 8 women harem, one for each of the different sexual compatibilities within my harem. Let's say one of my friends comes over, a man that has fought in the trenches with me, a man who has saved my life, a man that I've saved his life. We are blood brothers. We will do anything for one another. We both have the perspective, no greater love than when a man gives up his life for his friend. And I am willing to give up my life for my friend, and he is willing to give up his life for me. He comes visiting, and I notice that he's starting to have an eye for one of my girls, you know? And I see like, oh, you're having an eye for one of my girls, huh? And I have a conversation with him. And then I think about things and I strategize in certain ways and I introduce him to one of my girls and I let him bed one of my girls. That's simple. I let one of my blood brothers bed one of my girls. And I share one of my girls with him because I love him. You see what I'm saying? Of course, if you guys would actually like watch the show Vikings, this happened all the time. This happened with Ragnar, and this happened with his friend Floki. Like very normal. It was a very normal thing, part of their culture, because all of them fought and died together constantly in the trenches. And they would share their harems with each other. This is also actually traditional, like especially like for example the Eskimo tribes in the far north, they all did this. Anytime that they would have a guest in that would visit their tribe, the elder of the home who would have multiple women would make arrangements for one of his wives to sleep with the guest. It's very normal. One of the reasons why is because they needed new blood, hoping that his wife would actually get pregnant with that child because it would keep the biodiversity of the tribe, for one, but also because he was their guest. It's customary. You see what I'm saying? And that is how far compatibility can go between male to male friendships and male to male relationships. Again, from an evolutionary psychology perspective. Because evolutionary psychology is aware of the need for biodiversity within the context of a fucking tribe. Don't you get it, folks? This is literally how the human race is supposed to behave. But for some reason, the goddamn nuclear family rules. Oh, the nuclear family monogamy, that's how it's supposed to be, right? No wonder everyone's so depressed. Men can't even experience unconditional love in the way that they are supposed to. And women are unhappy because they feel so alone. Women are unhappy trying to force men all the time. Every time these women get pregnant, telling their men, ow, you need to be helping more. Just go watch 16 and Pregnant. Go watch the teen mom shows on Paramount Plus or Netflix. Go watch them. And watch how these little 16-year-olds who got pregnant start whining and bitching and moaning about how they're not getting any help from their men while their men are working and providing for them. It's because they're supposed to have sister wives who are helping them. Because it's not the men's job. Also, furthermore, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, did you know what happens when men at night actually hear crying babies? Their testosterone drops because their own bodies are assuming that there isn't a woman around to take care of the baby. So their testosterone drops, their estrogen rises, so that it's making them more female, so that the man is more motivated to get up in the middle of the night to take care of the baby. That's wrong. That's why in ancient times, we see this in the red tent, for example. We see this in the Israelites, in the book of Exodus, in the book of Deuteronomy, for example, within the Torah. We see how women had their own little tents and men had their grand tents. And all of his wives would have a little tent around the grand tent, basically. And within this tent structure, the women would get pregnant and they'd go off and have their baby, and one of her sister wives would be invited to the grand tent to stay with daddy to make daddy happy, and then she would have her baby, and all the other sister wives would come by and share and nurse one another and educate the new mom on how to have the baby, and no woman would ever raise a child by herself, ever. So the man didn't even have to participate in the female space. The man would never have to change a diaper in his entire life because all of his wives would handle it within their unit of camaraderie, their mature feminine, right? But nowadays, because of nuclear family, men are weaker because their testosterone is dropping because they are forced to have to, equality in a relationship. That means you have to help take care of this baby at the same time. No, that's not how that works. No, that's not how that works. And then women are pre-programmed by society to say to shit on men for not being around or for not helping with the baby. No, it's bullshit. It was never a man's responsibility before the society existed. It was never male responsibility to take care of babies or have anything to do with babies. It wasn't. It was supposed to be the camaraderie. It was supposed to be the mature feminine within underneath his own roof. It was supposed to be among the sister wives and their camaraderie that was to take care of children. Magdalene asks, what if your blood brother got your woman pregnant? Well, that would be with my permission. And I would also, like, men would be aware of their time of the month and which, and if she would if she's likely to conceive or if she's not likely to conceive at that moment in time. What if also that woman was breastfeeding actively and she hasn't had her period in a while, so technically he could have sex with her and then she wouldn't produce a child. All those factors would come into play mentally if a man is going to share one of his wives with another man. And then are all the women in the harem shareable or only some? That's up to the man, and that's his decision. And his decision will be respected. Okay? So yeah, this is the entire point, folks. This is how evolutionary psychology works. You could see evolutionary psychology playing out with our sexual behavior. You can see how it plays out with the size and shape of our various genitalia. You can see how our psyche, how our bodies react to our behavior, which is as a result of direct result of our psyches, and how it determines our genetic future and the survival of the race, as well as all of our behavior, including our hypergamy and our polygyny. The term and it show and you know, because women prefer to be with other women that they're a high camaraderie with, that means it's possible for a man to have a compatible relationship with each of those women, and those women can share that man. So it supports polygyny, which means hypergamy and polygyny are actually very complementary sexual strategies and actually built to come together as one. See, most people think that the red pill is out there to say that that hypergamy is a bad thing. No, it's a good thing. But what the red pill doesn't do is it doesn't explain the value of polygyny, because fucking Rollo Tomasi, with his FI child superiority complex bullshit, is still trying to tell people that monogamy at the end of the day is an ideal that he upholds as a devout Christian. Excuse me while I go jump off a bridge, because he's lying to himself. And as much as he likes to claim that he is a behavioral psychologist, he is entirely ignoring the evolutionary psychology component of Jungian analytical psychology. He doesn't understand nature, and he is utilizing nurture as a way to support or prove his ego investments when it comes to the nuclear family. A nuclear family that even he himself claims doesn't actually support him well enough as a man, according to Rational Male Volume 1, in the chapter discussing solipsism and Mrs. Tomasi, the ENFP, that he projects ENFP behavior on all other women. I like Tomasi, he's a great dude. The thing is that his work is incomplete. The red pill is incomplete. There's a lot of problems I have with the Impro because of the incompleteness. And most people accuse me, oh, Mr. C.S. Joseph, that means you're a very purple-pilled person. I'm like, no. It's just that unlike the red pill, I actually leave room for masculine idealism, because there's enough masculine idealism there to make it work. So, for example, there's an anime called Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. There's a character, an ENTP character. His name is Naze. Naze is a polygynist. He has multiple wives. What he does, he's part of a space gang. He has his own spaceship where his wives, his harem, lives with him. Basically, some of them are combat pilots. Some of them are to take care of the children in the nursery. Some of them are cooks. Some of them are pilots. It doesn't. Some of them are mechanics. It doesn't matter. But these women, he literally rescues them from the muck, from the ditch, from whorehouses. He rescues them, turns them into his wives, takes care of them, and creates this huge, giant family. And the ENTJ woman helps run his harem, constantly tells him, like, you know, or tells other people, he's just got a lot of love to give. And yeah, guess what? Masculine idealism has a lot of love to give. Why? Because masculine idealism is looking for unconditional love. It just cannot find unconditional love from one woman. It can only find it from many women, because it puts it together like puzzle pieces internally. That's how men get unconditional love. That's the reality. That's how it works. And evolutionary psychology supports this based on female-to-female relationships being based on camaraderie, and male-to-male relationships being based on compatibility, so that a man can be compatible with multiple women, and multiple women can be camaraderie with each other, but compatible to the one man. There you go. That's how it works. That's the reality. That's the truth. But who can accept this? Who can accept this? Who can? A lot of people like to make the argument that because there isn't a lot more women out there than men by a huge margin, which there is more women than men out there, that's for sure. But just because there isn't by a huge margin, that means that this lifestyle which I am purporting is not really possible. The thing is, though, is that in order for a man to have multiple women and be able to provide for multiple women, he has to be high value, an obvious high value man, right? The problem is that most men out there aren't high value. And that's why only a few get to enjoy the fruits of their labor as a result of building their masculinity every single day. But even society keeps them down from doing so because society is afraid of masculinity actually challenging society, thus bringing society down to its knees. Because masculinity is the source of revolution. So society is in their interest to make sure masculinity doesn't exist, which is why churches do not allow masculinity to exist in the churches, because if you can hit people, people make decisions based on their spirituality. And if you take away masculinity from the church, then no one will ever rise up against the government because the government is in league with the church to keep masculinity down. Same thing with corporate America or any corporation situation as well, because the corporations also, like the government, do not want masculinity, because if there's masculinity, then other rival corporations will form to challenge them and create competition in the market. Masculinity is all about competition. Masculinity has to be removed. We cannot stop, we cannot bring back, we cannot stop fatherlessness. We cannot bring back the fathers unless they have something to live for and ultimately to die for. And when you tell men out there that, hey, you actually can, and evolutionary psychology, your genes literally support, if not hope, that you have multiple women in your life, all of a sudden they have something to fight for. All of a sudden they have something to die for. Masculinity will return, which will lead to revolution, and the elite will be conquered, and the earth will finally be free. Free of them, free of the disease that is the seed of Cain. The serpent seed. So, that's ultimately the conspiracy that's at play here, as crazy as I sound. But that's what's happening. This is why masculinity is not allowed to exist. That's why we have fatherlessness. Because if masculinity existed, we'd have revolution on our hands, and society would change literally overnight. So, yeah, that's the truth, folks. That's the truth. And it's because of these situations, these beliefs, they're not beliefs, they are facts. They are backed by evolution, they are backed by our genes. It is genetic, and our genes are determined by our types. This is reality. If we want to have a future, then we need to live by them and not the other way around. So, anyway, folks, thanks for watching Cutting Edge October 2022. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I'm very thankful for all of you to be here. I'll see you guys tonight on the Discord. Later.